Hello, everyone, and welcome for another week of Generational Curse Words. I am Olivia. We have Mustafaa here, and we are really excited to get into today's conversation.
Yeah, hello,
Yeah.
hello, hello. Really excited about today's topic and discussion.
hmm
Um, but first, I'll check in as to how things are going. How things going with you, Olivia?
Things are going well. Things are going well. I feel like we both have gone through different things today. Well, this
Uh huh.
past week that have led us to want to talk about this
Mm-hmm.
curse word specifically in our community. And
Mm-hmm.
I can I can set it up a little bit to
Mm-hmm.
tell you a little bit about the story that got me into thinking about this because the curse word this week is shallowness.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to understand, like, you ever have encounters and it takes you days to really figure out, like, what the hell really
Yeah.
happened there? Like,
What was that
it
about? Yeah.
rubbed you the wrong way. You know how you feel and you kind of know why, but like, it's just kind of like, what was that? Like, what the hell
Yeah.
was that
Yeah.
about? So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
just a little story, and then I'll check in with you, but just a little story. Um, we celebrated Arthur's birthday last week.
Mm-hmm.
And as the activity for his birthday, I got on the Seat Geeks and I got us tickets to go to the Washington Wizards game.
Mm-hmm.
We had previously we've tried to dates that incorporate a first for both of us. So
Mm-hmm.
a couple of weeks ago, he took us to our first concert. We went to go see Mick Jenkins, which
Oh.
is
Okay.
I don't feel like no one knows who that is, but everyone should know who it is. He's one of
Mm-hmm.
my favorite rappers. Like,
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorite rappers. I have two top three rappers. Number one is Lupe Fiasco. Number two is Mick Jenkins, and
Mm-hmm.
number three is Talib Kweli. Even though he's kind of getting a little old and bitter. I don't know what's going on with him.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to rest in his divine masculinity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But just going on Twitter rants, attacking women. It's just unnecessary.
Okay.
But they're kind of like the trilogy to me in the artistic
Mm-hmm.
space of hip hop. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, Lupe is like he's like an intellect and a wordsmith.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Mick Jenkins, who is at the heart of everything. He's a poet. Like, he is a
Uh,
poet. He gives
mm,
me Gil Scott Heron vibes,
uh-huh.
and just representing that genealogy so well. Even though to a lot of people that aren't tuned into his music, it can sound a bit rough. It's a lot of bitches and N words and all of that. But I mean, it's
Mhm,
Chicago. Come on now.
mhm,
I think he is a poet. I think he's an amazing talent. And then I think Talib Kweli is very first. He's an amazing storyteller.
mhm,
And I think he's very prophetic in his approach to the art form. But again,
mhm,
um, and we this happens all the time, years and years and years in the game. You can it's so easy to get a little frustrated, a little bitter, and have some
mhm.
misdirected emotions, whatever they may be.
Yeah,
um but pray for that man.
yeah.
um so um our date for his birthday was our first NBA game.
Mm,
And we went to go see the Wizards, and it was a really good game. They played
mm,
against the Cavaliers, and the Cavaliers is a pretty solid team
yeah,
this
mhm,
this go around for this NBA season, and it was a really good game. I don't always have high hopes for the Wizards. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm sure I'm not the only
mhm.
person that said this, but it was really competitive,
Uh,
really neck and neck
mhm,
until the middle of the fourth quarter. So
mhm,
really good. This, but the incident before the game is what led me to say, like, this needs to be a curse word. Like, I don't know what it is, and we're gonna figure it out. But going into the game, they had two security checkpoints.
mhm,
So we went in through the front door, and this guy checked my stuff, whatever. He had this little card, like a 5x9 card for how big
mhm,
my bag could be. This
mhm.
is our first game, so I didn't
Right,
know the bag
right.
policy going into Capital One Arena. But he goes in, tells us to enjoy the game. I go in, everything is good. We're walking to tickets, And then a random guy is like, ma'am, ma'am. And you know me, Mustafa.
Right.
There's just certain energy that flies over my head because the way
Right.
that I carry myself, people tend to address me a certain type of
Right.
way. So yelling ma'am across the corridor just doesn't register
Right.
with my mind.
Right.
It just doesn't. You know,
Right.
excuse me, you know,
Mm.
can you step to the side really quickly? You know, like
Mhm.
there's just certain niceties that register. If someone's
Mhm.
aggressively yelling ma'am, I know ain't no way in hell
You
they're talking to me,
talking to me.
right? And so I look because I'm nosy and I'm thinking
Right.
he's talking to someone else. I look and he's looking at me and he was like, can you step over there? Mind you, I'd already made it through the security checkpoint. He
Right.
sent me over to a side table to because he said that she had to check my bag. He knew my bag was too big. He sent me to another side table. Now I've gone to two security checkpoints and it's a young woman and she basically told me that my bag is too big and
Mhm.
that I'm either going to have to check it in a locker and pay money or walk it
Mhm.
back to the car.
Mhm.
And immediately I'm like, nah. First of all, this is extremely predatory and it affects women at a
Mhm.
higher rate than men because you have a bag policy. And so now
Right.
you already have a policy that puts it in a that sets up a position where women who are already paid 70 cents to the dollar that men have
Mhm.
paid are now having to pay to walk to check in their bag for convenience or walk all the way back to their car wherever that may be.
Right.
And so mind you, everyone that's involved in this situation are people that look like me. These are all black
Mhm.
people, I'm assuming, that live in or near DC. And you know I made it past the first checkpoint and the next person's
Right.
only going to check my ticket and let me in. But you
Right.
took it upon yourself to call me out and put me to the side after someone else had that same option and chose not to.
It chose not to. Right.
And so I'm talking to the young lady and I'm like, okay, like I understand you don't make the policy cool. You know, Arthur is frugal, so we already gonna walk it back to the car. We're not paying for your locker. But I was
Mm.
like, just basically asking, is this bag policy very obvious? Like, is it very clear when you purchase a ticket? Because this seems a bit predatory. Like, this seems
Right.
a bit predatory. Like, we already paid for our tickets. Tickets aren't cheap. We already made it through the door. Like, you know, and one thing that's going to upset me every time is when
Mhm.
I'm talking to someone from my community.
Mhm.
You know, I'm addressing you
Mhm.
community member to community member, and
Mhm.
you respond to me in white man policy.
Right. Right.
That's going to piss me off every time,
Right.
okay? Because
Right.
I'm trying to have an aside conversation.
Right.
And on top of that, why do I want to be free more than you want to be free? I'm here
Right.
enjoying the game with money that we have, you know, just left over. You're
Right.
here working in a building that you do not own, making money that you know you deserve more of. I'm trying to have an
Right.
aside conversation. If anyone should want to be off the plantation more, it should be you. Why are you
You.
responding
Right.
to me in overseer policy? That's going to piss me off every time, especially since I'm getting mad again, especially since I already admitted that we can't change anything about this.
Right.
I already admitted that we can't change anything about this. I'm just asking you based off of your
Mhm.
experience of working here all these years or all these
Right.
months or
Right.
however long you've been here, is the policy clear or is it some bullshit?
Right.
Because I already know it's some bullshit. I
Right.
just need to be validated community member
Exactly.
to community
Exactly.
member and you talking
Yeah.
to me an overseer. I was
Yeah.
so uh it's like I'm not upset at her. I'm
Mhm.
I'm upset that there is a trend amongst the black community where people have it's partially an inability, but it's woefully a choice to not dive deep, to not
Right.
switch out of
Right.
the surface so that we can go
Right.
deep just for a second. Because
Just for a second.
the guy that let me in, I bet you for a split second, he went deep and said, you know, it ain't even that serious. This
There it
kinfolk right
is.
here,
There it
I'm gonna
is.
let her
There
through
it
the
is.
door. She gonna go watch the game and have her a good time.
Right. There it is. That reminds me of the Target. We have a Target of Rhode Island Avenue. That's not too far
Mm-hmm.
from where you live. So you know that
Yeah.
Target. And I went into that Target. And when I went into Target, I need to use the restroom. So I said, "Where's the restroom?" So the security guard at the front, he said, "It's all the way in the back." He showed me where it was. I went to the back, the restroom, and the door was locked.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to find someone to unlock the door. So I went all the way back up to the security guard and I said, "Oh, well, it's locked." He said, "Oh yeah, you got to find." I said, "Well, you could have told me that." And then I asked, I said, "Why is the door locked?" I said, "Out of all the other," I said, "I want to speak to the manager." And I talked to the manager. I said,
Mm-hmm.
"Why is the door locked here at this Target?" He said, "Well, our location, we have a lot of theft and everything." So I said, "Out of all the Targets, and I go to Targets all over the country, this one is locked." I said, "Does that make sense to you?" I said, "The fact that there's lots of," I said, "Should I, when I have to go to the restaurant," I said, "plus there's no sign, there's nothing to let you know, and I got to go and I go back, then I've got to look for someone. You don't have someone standing by to unlock the door." And I asked him, and this is
Mm-hmm.
what I ask people. I said, "I'm just asking you, like you said, does that make sense to you?"
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the part. I said, "No, no, no, hold on, bro. I'm just asking. I'm not asking you to change.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to articulate. I'm just saying, come on now. Does this make sense to you?" Well, it's with. I said, "Oh," and this is where he got upset. I said, "Oh, I understand." I said, "This is the black Target. You're the manager of the black Target."
Mm-hmm.
No, 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 no. This is not. I said, "Well, you're the manager of the black Target because this
Mm-hmm.
is the only Target where this happens, and it's in the
Yeah.
community. It's in the middle of the hood." I said, "So the black Target, and really, so that was the only way that for me to go deeper than his
Mm-hmm.
whole shallowness, to his ego." I said, "Oh, so you're a manager of a black Target. You're not a manager of a Target." Because every other Target, people don't lock the restrooms. The
Yeah.
restrooms are open. You can just go in, use the restroom or whatever.
And
And you haven't figured out how in this community, because
mm-hmm.
people steal, because black people, you haven't figured out how to facilitate the same kind of
Mm-hmm.
experience for black people, that other people experience, the people experience it at other Targets. But you're absolutely right. You understand policy, you understand what's
Mm-hmm.
going on. You're just like, come on, we can go a little bit deeper than that. Just
Exactly.
validate.
I'm just
Yeah.
asking if us as a people in this small micro moment can
Right.
join forces to agree against the machine.
Right. Right. Right.
That's all. And
Right.
even if we do this, even if we, it's not going to change anything.
It's not. It's
I already
not.
said that.
Right.
Like,
But let us stay sane for a moment. For a moment, just let us
mm-hmm.
let us be sane. Let's just acknowledge this ain't right.
Yeah.
Just acknowledge it. Um, but I think Olivia, the part of it is, I always talk about, again, people who do ugly jobs,
Mm-hmm.
um, and who do harmful jobs. I think in order for us to validate what we do, we have to be shallow. We can't go deep. We
Yeah.
can't go to that part where we know, you know, we hurting our own people.
Mm-hmm.
We can't um, go to that space so that lets us see things for what they really are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'll never forget. I saw the interview between Monique and Steve Harvey. I don't know if you've seen this interview. And Monique was saying, she was talking about her mistreatment as a black woman in the
Mm-hmm.
industry, and she was talking to Steve. She said, "And Steve, you know that I was treated wrong. You know this stuff is not right." He said, "But you didn't speak up to it." And she said, "You know the game." And he said, "Monique," he said, "You're right. You know the game. I know it's a game, and you know it's a game." But
Mm-hmm.
he actually said out of his mouth, he said, "There are too many people depending on me." and I'm not going to sacrifice, you know, what I do or what I get for my integrity. He actually said that. He said, I'm not going to, I'm not,
Mhm.
my integrity, I can't have integrity at this. I got to play this game, and my friend was watching again when we talk about shallowness. Um, Monique, if you know it's a game, I know she's just looking for validation. At least
Yeah.
you let the validate you, but it's a game. And really, Monique, you're mad because you couldn't play the game in a way
Mhm.
that benefited you. You know it's a game. You know it's twisted. You know they're cheating.
Yeah.
But there's a certain amount of shallowness when you expect that you can play the game. You're gonna play their
Mhm.
game and you're gonna win at it, and you can't win at it
Yeah.
because even if you can't. No matter how shallow we are, we end up worse off.
Yeah.
And we set ourselves back.
Mhm.
We set ourselves back, and I deal I
Absolutely.
deal I deal with that a lot with work where people say, well, the policy is, and well, you have to do this and you have to do that, and you ask them, well, does this make sense? And they go, huh? I know what you're saying, but does this make sense? And sometimes it takes a lot for people to say, okay, no, it doesn't. But I say, okay, all right, and all right, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that. That's all I wanted for you, to acknowledge. But don't stand here and try to make me think I'm crazy or that
Mhm.
something's wrong with me because I'm saying to you, look, um, why are you making a big deal out of this? Why are you
Mhm.
making this something that it doesn't have to be? And it's so sad, Olivia, because we have no power. And part of the shallowness is that we're trying to create a space where we have some kind of power.
Yeah.
And like you say, articulating what the overseer or carrying out the overseer's job gives us some sense of power, on the surface. But everybody know you ain't got no power. You're just a token, and your job is just a token. And but at least you could have some dignity if you could just say, okay, all right, all right, come on. I'm not gonna make a big
Mhm.
deal out of this. Come on, let's, And they check your bag, so they know it's no. What you mean it's too big? If they check your bag, you're not carrying any contraband or anything that you're
Yeah.
not. There's not a bomb in your bag or anything. I mean, so what's the problem? Why do you have to check your bag? Are you
Mhm.
going to take something out? I mean, what is it? What is it about? But yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. People have no power.
Exactly.
They got a flashlight and a
And a
whistle
clipboard.
and some keys and,
Black people love talking about that clipboard, child.
and right and a clipboard, right? And
Yeah.
and they want to give some meaning to it,
Mhm.
but you
And
know,
even, I mean, even when you talk about power, especially as a community, we talk about power that was stolen from us in the lens
mm-hmm,
of chattel slavery,
mm-hmm,
as being the descendants of enslaved Africans in this
mm-hmm,
hemisphere. And even our solutions, in my opinion, even our solutions are shallow. Even reparations and the way that we discuss it
right,
is the result of not digging deep.
yeah,
When we
yeah,
talk about the things that we lost because we were enslaved and we are now the descendants of enslaved Africans, it wasn't money,
right,
it wasn't
right,
money. It was like, and we are very clear about what happened to us during that time. Why are we not demanding the opposite of those things now? Like,
right,
for
right,
instance, as Black women, there was once a time that we carried other people's children and that we
mm-hmm,
cared for other people's children. So why isn't reparations for us something along the lines of extended maternity leave,
yeah,
or
yeah,
being able to, now you don't have to raise anyone else's kids, now you can raise your own kids and not have to
right,
worry about where your money is coming from?
right,
Why aren't we getting if our ancestors grew crops in this country for generations on generations, why aren't we getting a tax cut for the produce that we
Yeah,
buy, or the
yeah,
rice that we
yeah,
purchase?
yeah,
If our ancestors already did our time, because that's the argument that white Americans like to say, well, we didn't do it, we didn't
right,
do it, but you still
right,
benefit from it, right? So if
right.
our ancestors were enslaved even when they did not commit a crime, why don't we have a program where we can have our prison sentences accelerated,
Yeah, yeah,
or get outside of good
yeah.
behavior? Like, why aren't we digging deep when it
Deeper.
comes
Yeah, yeah,
to these reparations?
yeah,
Why is it just money?
yeah, yeah,
That's a superficial solution.
yeah. And I think part of it's because we have been convinced. It's I think we are still we've been educated by
Mhm.
this slave master, quote unquote, and so we think. They used to make jokes about the captives when Massa was sick. We would say, Massa, we sick. We would talk in plural as if whatever was happening to the Massa was happening to us.
Mhm.
And we act like that. We speak like we speak the language of the captor. We his concerns and his fears and his hopes, his desires. We've taken that on. We
Mhm.
have been Americanized, and so we look at the problem of reparations as if it is a problem because it's a
Mhm.
problem to them. It's going to cost us this. So we think in those terms. We think that it's they make it about money. So to us, it's really about money. And we will even say, well, we can't figure out a just amount because there's no amount. So, to ask for money, we can't figure out. And you're right. We don't even think about the actual travesty, the actual events, the actual things that happen that we still suffer for today, and that
Mhm.
it's not really about money. It's about reparations, repairing, what was taken, and it was not just money that was
Yeah.
taken. What if I mean, for God, if it was just money, if they just came and took the gold and that was all they took, right?
Mhm.
But it really wasn't about. They took people, they took opportunity, they took development, they took the future, they took capacity, they took growth, they took well-being. I mean, health. So all of these things are things that can easily uh, be granted and have been granted to other people with
Mhm.
respect to what they have suffered. It wasn't just money. It's things like education, college education, tuition. It's all of those things. But you're right. We don't go deeper because part our difference is when it comes to reparations for Black people, we're still thinking and touting the line,
Mhm.
for the overseer. We're thinking we're worried about what it's going to cost him. We're worried about what it's going to look like when
Mhm.
when we as a people, get certain benefits because of what happened,
Yeah.
and white folks don't get to share in that, or they don't get to call the shots in that, or they get to stand by and see that. Um, we're worried about, I've even seen Black folks at these meetings, protesting and fighting against critical race theory. We don't want that taught in schools. We don't want our kids, and
Yeah.
talking about Black kids, we don't want our Black kids uh, growing up with a sense of hate, knowing what happened. We don't want them to know. I mean, what is wrong with you? you know, that they don't even have to articulate it half the time because you got Black folks out there that's
Mhm.
arguing against it. But again, it's a symptom of not wanting, being afraid to
Mhm.
go deeper into the conversation.
Yeah.
Um, deeper
Yeah.
into
And
what's really happening.
even the idea of reparations, that is something that takes place in the shallow realm, right? When
Hmm.
you We could create our own if we dug deep
Hmm.
as a community. We could set up funds for for Black women in our community to
Mhm.
apply for money or request money within our, governance structure so that they could stay home with their kids until their
Yeah.
kids are 5 or it's time to go
Yeah.
to school. Um, we could, within our governance structure, take up gardening, whether it be urban
Yep.
vertical gardens
Yep.
or reclaiming land. There are so many Black families that have, I see it in North Carolina all the time, and
Mhm.
it's so funny that that have abandoned their farms or their family
Mm.
land and only want to
Mm.
fight once it's being um, threatened by development or
Right.
someone trying to come in and build on the land or eminent domain and
Right.
things of that nature. But we could reclaim the land and the spaces that are ours, even in the South. If you have a backyard, I don't care what neighborhood you live in. If you have a backyard, you have land to make something shake.
Yeah.
You could make it so that you don't have to purchase crops from the
Right.
store.
Right. We were having that conversation today. I was telling them that in all of the centers, the juvenile justice centers, the ones that, especially the ones that are out, in Western Maryland, Eastern Maryland, I said every single one of them should have a garden. I said young people should be growing food. I said imagine how soothing, how mindful that would be as an activity for young people to grow food.
Mhm.
I say for them to actually grow the food, learn to cook the food, prepare the food, eat the food, have a community garden, have a what is it, a farmer's market where they could sell
Mhm.
or distribute food into the community. And you're talking about reparations, or you're talking about rehabilitation of young
Mhm.
people, restorative justice.
Or even
What if
exchange
young people?
goods with other centers and building
Exactly.
community
Oh,
amongst all of the
exactly.
kids so they're not siloed and in separate
Exactly.
facilities.
Because one of the things that young people say is they want better food.
Mhm.
I mean, so what if they grow the food? And I told this young this man who was a new employee coming in. He said, I said, what's your role going to be? He said, well, I'm gonna be a cook. I said, well, in my mind, you're a chef. I said,
Mhm.
because there's an opportunity for you to teach young people how to prepare meals. They might be interested in the culinary industry or the hospitality industry. He said, I never thought about it. I said, yes. I said, so when we talk about developing a youth development infrastructure and culture and
Mhm.
policy and mindset, what are the opportunities for young people to grow and to develop and to learn? I said, and if we each of us think about what it is that we do and how we can pass that on,
Mhm.
to young people in the community. He said, wow. He said, I'd like to do that. He said, I'd like to. I said, yeah. So
Mhm.
you got a captive audience. You got young people who are detained or committed. I said, you can take a few of them and you can teach them how to
Mhm.
prepare meals. You can teach them that. So imagine if they're
Mhm.
growing food and now, because one of the main complaints is the food. We don't like the food. You wouldn't give your children this food. So if they can grow food, prepare food, eat the food, and you're right,
Mhm.
much of what we need to do, or what we can do, we don't need permission to do it. We don't need permission. We
Absolutely.
can do it. We can just do it. Why don't we?
Mhm.
Why are we still so surface? We don't go deep enough to think about. We've
Yeah.
got urban, what do we call them? Food deserts, right?
Mhm.
So why don't we just grow some food?
And that's so, because even, like, I'm starting to think now, because while I was at Clemson, I don't know. I'm sure the classes have changed a little bit since you got your master's there. But when I was getting
Mm-hmm.
my master's in youth development
Mm-hmm.
leadership, one of the classes was specifically about young people in nature, and my
Mm-hmm.
big thesis paper was about Black children's almost return to nature, because
Mm-hmm.
we have such a, and I'm even pre-enslavement, we have such a rich agricultural history, understanding, connection to the earth, and not just to the ground. Because if you farm or if you plant or if you know anything about that, it's more than just the soil
Right.
and how you till it. It's the air quality, it's the moisture, it's even in and it's it's even in your spirit and how you
Mm-hmm.
approach the work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Frustrated farmers don't grow shit. I don't know
Right. Right.
if anyone knows this.
Right.
Angry farmers do not grow nothing. It
Right.
really is all about the presence that you bring out to the field. And so
Right.
I think not only would and I'm saying farming just because I'm from the South, but
Mm-hmm.
farming, gardening, whatever. Not only
Mm-hmm.
would agriculture solve the issue of low quality food, but it awakens something
Mm-hmm.
in you
Mm-hmm.
as a young person, um,
Mm-hmm.
and far beyond personal development. It really opens up a just being outside in the sun,
Yep.
listening to
Yep.
the birds, being one with the ground, one with the
Yep.
land. It opens a
Yep.
window that for a lot of us is closed
Yeah.
post those recess years
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
primary school.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And again,
Absolutely.
that's the going deep, the going
Mm-hmm.
deep. So
Mm-hmm.
being able
Mm-hmm.
to know that because you have to go past the shallow to get deep. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
address that anyway. We need a garden because we need better food. Cool. That's
Right.
dealt
Right.
with the shallow, all done
Right.
there. Let's go deep. Now we're
Yeah.
going to awaken windows to our soul, our African heritage and
Mm-hmm.
genealogy, spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
understanding that, again, you get out of life what you are. The same thing
Yep.
goes with what you plant in the soil. Who are
Yep.
you bringing to the garden? Who are you bringing to the farm? Who are you when you walk onto the land? Because that has
Yep.
everything to do with it. And George Washington Carver said all the time. George Washington Carver said all the time, I speak to the plants.
I
People
speak to the plants
and
all
they
the time.
speak to me.
Right, right. And people don't want to talk about that aspect of George Washington Carver
Mm-hmm.
because to the European, oh, he must be crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he said under no circumstance, like people say, how do you know what to do? He said, because the plants speak to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and he wasn't like, well, I sense this. No, they speak to me,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a period of time where even people who had houseplants, they said, I mean, it was like a fad among white folks, talking to your plants or whatever. And it's again something that they just picked up, from us and from, our culture and heritage, communing with nature or whatever. But you're absolutely right. There's a level that goes beyond just the soil, and that relationship that can
Yeah.
revitalize and awaken something in young
Mm-hmm.
people. Young people are never the same. I remember when we did the planting project that we would always do um, with a group of kids in April, and just how they would be transformed at putting some seeds or seedlings in the ground, coming back 4 or 6 weeks later, and it's food, and we could take this food and
Mm-hmm.
we can actually eat it and what it tastes like
Mm-hmm.
and everything, but it changes you. And I think I always say that young people should be taught how to grow something,
Yeah.
and we don't need permission for. There's so much that we can do that we don't need permission for.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it gets crazy and people decide, well, we're gonna stop you, we're gonna forcibly stop you, then we got to decide, what we want to go to war for,
Mm-hmm.
what we want to battle if it ever gets to that point. But and I always think about, like, again, Rosewood, Tulsa, things like that,
Yeah.
when black folks were doing things for themselves without permission, and especially because, white folks did not want uh, us to have any part of what
Mm-hmm.
they were doing. So we said fine. So it may come to a point where, as we begin to grow and do things, we may have to defend it. It's always going to come back to our young people and youth development
Yeah.
and what it means, because that is the future, and it's not our future, but it's their future. But
Mm-hmm.
you have to facilitate ways for them to do it, and they do. I mean, I think for young people,
Mm-hmm.
when you give them opportunities, they will go deeper. They always want to go beyond the shallow. I mean, young
Yeah.
people
I
pick up on
mean,
something
that's
that's
why I
fake
say
in a minute.
even when young people walk into our programs, why did I say it like that?
Mm,
Hmm. Even when young
mm,
people walk into now I'm thinking about programming and how we program young people, but even when
mm-hmm.
anyways, um even when young people, and you, it's so crazy. Why did I say it like, because now I'm thinking about
Yeah.
programming and what we actually do to young people instead of talking about youth
Yeah.
programs. And I did
Uh-huh.
that earlier today because I was in the car on the phone and I wanted steak. I wanted a steak for dinner. And
Uh-huh.
I was talking to my sisters and I was like, yeah, I'm about to go to Trader Joe's. Mind you, I was not about to go to Trader Joe's. I was actually about to go to Food Lion. But since I said it that
Mhm.
way, I was like, might as well go to Trader Joe's. Someone's telling me go to Trader Joe's. Let me go to Trader Joe's. So
Yep.
I've been
Yep.
saying things and then listening to it all
Right.
all day
Right.
long. But um, all that to say, young people show up deep.
Yep.
They
Yep.
do. And in the first 15 seconds of interacting with the adults in the space, they know whether they need to jump into the shallow end or
Yep.
it's safe to stay in the deep end.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
interesting. And that's a true analogy. That's exactly what it is.
Mhm.
It doesn't take long. I mean, it's almost like instinctive to them, like it's a survival thing. They know immediately
Mhm.
if it's safe to stay in the deep end of the water or if they need to move it to the shallow end in
Yeah.
order to navigate that interaction with us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what has made our job so tricky in the past is that
Hmm.
we walk in, we work for we're coming in, we're doing the youth programming, but the program has been there for way before we entered the space. And so
Hmm.
the young people are already swimming in the in the shallow end and they see
Hmm.
you and I walk in and we
Right.
jump straight into the deep end.
Right.
And
Right.
then they have that weird thing of like, are they playing? Like, are they gonna come
Right.
over
Right.
here? Like,
Right.
is
Right.
it safe
Right.
to go over
Right.
there?
Right.
Can I start cursing? Like, can I
Right.
start being
Right.
myself?
Right.
um, so yeah, I think with young people, and now we're kind of inching into the way back, but
Yeah.
I think with young people, understanding that they show up already swimming in the deep end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and even as an analogy, now as adults it's on us to trust that they know what they're doing because in order
Hmm.
to swim in the
Hmm.
deep end you have to know how to swim, and at the end
Yeah.
of the day you in the shallow end. So who are you
Right.
trying to teach?
Right. Right. Right.
Who are you really
Right.
trying to teach? Who are you really
Right.
trying to contain, control, guide, or do you
Hmm.
just need to take their lead and decide on what you need to bring out that could actually add to this deep end
Yeah.
experience?
And it really is about faith and trust. It's about the
Mhm.
idea that, as adults, most often we don't trust young people. We don't trust them to do the right thing. We don't
Mhm.
trust them to create something different than what we have provided for them. We don't trust that there is something different. So
Mhm.
we still insist that they become, part of this shallowness that we exist in because we don't trust it there. And it really does take faith and trusting, okay, let's see where they're going to go. Let's
Mhm.
be here. If we're concerned, okay, we can have a buoy or something to pull them in if it gets too crazy, in the deep
Mhm.
end. But let's just trust that, that if they have the spunk, if they have the inspiration to go into the deep end things, to be
Mhm.
creative, to figure something out, to do something different that we don't recognize, if they have the guts to do that,
Mhm.
then let's support that. How can we
Mhm.
support that? How can we support something different, trusting that they don't come to this world messed up?
Yeah.
You know, they're not messed up until we mess them up.
Mhm.
So it's really about, admitting, having that conversation, you know, um, are we going to acknowledge that there's something weird about this, or this is shallow, that this isn't what it's supposed to be?
Mhm.
Admit it. Admit it. Okay, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, yeah, it doesn't make sense. You're right. This is a side conversation, and I really do need to give validation and speak truth to what's going on. So, you know, I'm sorry, but yeah, that is what's going on. I fix it. Yeah, validate. Yeah, this is crazy. This is crazy, and we need to do something about it. Like the guy said, okay,
Mhm.
I'm not gonna make an issue of this. Come on in with the bag and move on from it. Just
Mhm.
forget it. Understanding that there is a system, and we don't always have to submit to it. We can go deeper than what's there, and we can make that decision to do that. Um,
Yeah.
I got an interest rate for the car that I just bought because the guy, he said, look, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And normally, based on what your credit rating is, you would be paying something like, 15.9% for it. He says,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do this. 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 He said, and um, I'm going to get you 6.9 for that. I said, oh, shoot, that's more than,
Mm-hmm.
Navy Federal. That's better than Navy Federal was offering, whatever. He said, yeah, I do this. He says, between you and me, he said, I do this, for our folks.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, I mean, if the company approves it, what I don't know what he did, I don't know how he did it. That's not the point. The
Mm-hmm.
point is he went deeper than what the
Yeah.
situation required, understanding that there was a deeper place to go.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding we don't have to stay up in the top where, here, sir, according to your credit, you should really be paying 16%. I mean, he went deeper because he could,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, that's really understanding your power
That's yeah, and the huge piece because he could.
because he
And
could.
but you have to make sure that you can.
Right,
Because
right.
whenever we're in our AYD trainings and we talk about core competencies, which are
Mm-hmm.
the attributes, the mindsets, the behaviors that adults should um, practice in order to connect with young people um, in an efficient and effective and supportive way. We
Right,
say
right.
that you can't take someone someplace else you haven't been, or
Then,
you can't
right,
take someone someplace you haven't been. So
right.
even when thinking about the way back and repenting, which you broke it down for me, all the Latin words, repenting, repent, to
Mm-hmm.
rethink. Pen means to
Mm-hmm.
think. So
Mm-hmm.
when we're rethinking, there's an adjustment that we have to do with ourselves. So in order to not only adequately support young people, but to benefit from the magic, the creativity, the innovation that comes with young people, we have to make it so that we can move from the shallow end to
Yeah,
the deep
yeah,
end.
yeah, yeah.
Basically, you got to learn how to swim.
Gotta learn how to swim. We
You
gotta learn how to
gotta
swim.
swim,
Right,
okay?
right,
As
right.
people too, we gotta
Yep.
learn. We gotta learn.
For real, right?
So now I'm being shallow with the language. We gotta learn how to swim, okay?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Gotta learn how to swim. Uh,
We do. We do.
and
Yeah.
oh my gosh, and just to wow, just to share a little bit, um, in that arena because when we first met, um,
Mm,
in our early 20s, both a hot mess, child. Arthur did not know how to swim.
mhm,
And so we went to Miami. And that's
mhm,
another thing. It's so crazy how things work. That's how you know you're with the person you're supposed to be with. We
mhm,
were broke as hell when we first met. Ask me how we went to
mhm,
Miami. I wanted to go to Miami. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to Miami. Somehow we gonna go to Miami. I ain't never been to Miami. I ain't never been out the country. I ain't never done a grand trip except for Virginia Beach. But we going to
right,
Miami.
right.
And at the time, Arthur was like, "Well, we don't have a budget for Miami, but we have a virtual budget." And so somehow he came up with the idea again, going deep and creating. He
Mhm.
drove for Lyft to earn enough money so that we could
Okay.
go to Miami. Talk about going deep, right? Talk about
Mhm,
talk about
mhm,
going deep. We don't have it. We're in the
mhm,
shallow right now. We
mhm.
actually in the negatives, right? We on the
Right,
shore. But we gonna go to Miami. We're gonna create a he created a budget for us to go to Miami. Again, you don't have to wait for things to happen.
right,
You don't have to wait for the job. You don't have to wait for the tax return. You don't have to wait. You can create your own things. And
right.
but all this to say, so that's just one example. But when we got to Miami, Arthur didn't know how to swim when we first met. Now he knows how to
Mm,
swim, but he did not know how to
mhm,
swim. Even though he did not know how to swim, when we got in that
mhm,
ocean in Miami, he was trying so hard to learn how to swim. And so
Mhm.
he was, drinking water, paddling as like couldn't breathe, like doing the absolute most to learn how to
Uh,
swim. And I think, first of all, to me, that's what made me realize like this man is different. And
mhm.
and this is the exact type of man that I knew I wanted based off of my previous studies in Black masculinity. Like,
Mhm.
because the true testament of a man is not in his ability. It's
Right.
in his will. And
Yes.
so the fact that he knew he wanted to do something but didn't know how he was going to do it and hadn't yet proved to
Mhm.
himself that he could do
Mhm.
it, but
Mhm.
still found a way to do it because that's what I'm going to do. That to me is the real testament of a man. And I'm going to put that in air quotes because anyone can do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and ever
Yeah.
since we met, that has been the reality of our relationship at major life transitions, when things happen, when it seems like life has blown up in both of our faces. It may
Mhm.
look real crazy or feel real unstable for a little while. We might, I might be watching him drink a whole bunch of water and struggle and sink and
Mhm.
halfway float and halfway come back up. And is he gonna make it? He always does.
Yep.
Every
Yep.
single time. And I think
And
that's so when we talk about going deep, it's
mhm.
more so about creation, like really
Mhm.
creating,
Mhm.
understanding that what you have on the surface, the shallow, what you understand yourself to be is nothing compared to what's actually
Right.
there and what you can actually bring um
Right.
into fruition. So again, that repentance piece, that rethinking, gotta
Mhm.
go deep, and you gotta you gotta isolate a little bit.
Yeah.
You gotta
Yeah.
isolate. You gotta be in the
Yeah.
trenches.
Yeah. 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 And we've got to give all of that to our young people.
Mhm.
We've got to give that because that's really the only way they're going to thrive. Because
Mhm.
everything else is telling them what they can't do.
Yeah.
Everything is telling them what not to do. Um, as opposed to developing the will. And like you
Mhm.
said, it's really about your will. It's
Mhm.
about your will because that's what things bring about. Everything that's in existence was willed into existence.
Mhm.
And that's we are creators. We are creatives.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here for. So um
And so even
but
as adults, it's important to know that for us to go to the deep end, to the shallow end, it's it's going to be a sucky process, especially when you're so comfortable in the shallow end. You know how to
right,
navigate the shallow end. You know how to train young people to navigate the shallow
right,
end.
right,
And you just have to, at some point, there will be experiences where you realize that you're not where you're supposed to be, and you have to go
right,
into the
right,
deep end. You have to
right.
join young people if we really want to shift the world in the way that we've been talking about for generations.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to swallow water. You're gonna have to learn how to swim. You're gonna have to close your eyes. You're gonna have to be scared. You're gonna have to be nervous. You're
Yeah.
gonna have to not know what this is going to look like at the end, but
You're
know
right.
that where you are now is where we can't stay.
We can't stay here. We
Yeah.
can't stay here. And it's shallow to think that we can. We can't stay here.
Hmm. We can't.
You're right.
And our young people need us to leave the shallow end. They
Yeah.
really do, because at the end of the day, one thing about young people, their hearts are huge. Every single generation, a large percentage of our young people show up thriving in the deep end and slowly
Mm-hmm.
come to the shallow end and settle
Mm-hmm.
in the shallow end simply because we are there.
Yep.
No other reason.
No other reason.
It's that big heart
No other
of young
reason. That's
people.
that's the only that's the only access that they have to us.
Mhm.
So that you're right, for no other reason but simply because we're there.
Yeah.
Right.
So if
Yeah.
we want our young people to continue to thrive and we want to know what it feels like to thrive, got to learn how to swim.
Yeah,
Literally and
absolutely.
metaphorically, Black people, we got to
And
learn how to swim.
metaphorically. Absolutely. And with that, so our journaling I think is what shallow waters are we treading,
Mm,
and what do we need to do to muster up uh, that will to go deeper,
mm,
to go deeper. What do we? How can we do it scared? How can we trust that our will sustain us?
mm,
When we go into deeper conversations, when we go into deeper experiences, um, uh, um, there's a saying to be willing at any moment to sacrifice who you are for who you may become.
mm,
You know, um, who do we want to become, and how deep are we willing to go to become that person? You know,
yeah,
because we can't stay here.
you
I mean,
can't.
I like that. You're right. We can't stay here. I forgot who says we're either growing or we're dying.
Mm,
That's the nature of life. Things are either growing or they're dying. So if we stay here, we're dying. The very thing we're afraid of is
mm.
happening. We're dying.
And our young
So,
people will swim back to
and
save
yeah,
us and get
to
stuck.
save us
Mm.
and get stuck,
Oh my
and
gosh! Now I'm just
we
thinking
and
about
we yep,
everyone that's
yep, and
just
we've
yeah.
sacrificed too many generations, you know, because we were afraid.
Mm,
We've sacrificed too many generations because we're afraid. They're waiting for us to go come into the deep water. That's what they want. That's why they're doing what they're
mm,
doing. So
mm.
what do we need to do to get into the deep water? What do we need to? How do we need
Yeah,
to push ourselves? So that's what we can think about. So Olivia, this has been good. This has been
it's been
good. A
great.
good one. Yeah, it's been good.
It
It's
all
been good.
started with an angry story.
I know. I
It
know.
ended with something
Uh,
profound.
yeah, yeah. I got some gems to take back in.
Mm,
So, but thank you, folks, for joining us. Looking forward to our next conversation. And you can, of course, drop us any comments or reflections that you have
mm,
on any discussion we've had, or and even anything that you might have some curse words you might want us to explore or talk about. So you can drop that in there too. We'd like to hear from you. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us for another episode, and we will see you next week.
See you next time.